What is the difference between a desert and a wilderness? This Shabbat, as we begin reading the fourth book of the Torah, that seems like an important question. The English name for this book is Numbers because of the census that begins this week's Torah portion. But the Hebrew name is B'midbar, from the first verse of the Parsha, which reads, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe b'midbar Sinai, and God spoke from the midbar of Sinai. And while midbar is often translated as desert, the Sinai desert, it can also mean wilderness. So which is it, and what's the difference? Picture a desert in your mind. Perhaps you are imagining a vast open space, sand as far as the eye can see, empty, desolate, hardly anything grows there. There's no water. You want to leave the desert as soon as possible before your canteen of water runs out. The desert is no man's land. But if I told you to picture a wilderness, I think you'd imagine something entirely different. A wilderness is wild and unkept, but it is full of life. A wilderness is primordial and visceral, full of possibility and potential. You are in no rush to leave the wilderness. There are things to see here. There might be water hidden underfoot. And according to the rabbis, the wilderness is important because it is Heschel, it is ownerless. A person cannot own a wilderness, and therefore it belongs to all of us. If a desert is no man's land, then the wilderness is every man's land. Wilderness is a more accurate translation of midbar in the rabbinic imagination than desert. Tomorrow morning, Avital and Eli will share two terrific divrei Torah on Parashat B'midbar and offer their own beautiful interpretations of the meaning of the Israelites' wilderness wanderings. And tonight I want to offer my own because the midbar, the wilderness, is essential to the Jewish understanding of the world. It's fitting that this is the Torah portion we read each year on the Shabbat immediately before Simchat Torah, the holiday that celebrates the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. Because the rabbis draw a connection between the Torah and midbar. The midrash asks, why was the Torah given in the wilderness? And answers, just as a wilderness is free to all the inhabitants of the world, so too are the words of Torah free to them, as it says in Isaiah, "O all who are thirsty, come for water." The Torah had to be given in a place that was Heschel, ownerless, in order to teach us that the Torah's wisdom belongs to everyone. Another midrash expands on this idea. The Torah was given to the Israelites in the wilderness, for if it had been given in the land of Israel, then the inhabitants of the land would have said, it is ours. And if it had been given elsewhere, the people of that land would have laid claim to it. Therefore, it was given in the wilderness, where whoever wanted to learn from it could do so. Nobody can lay claim to truth. No one can say, I have all the truth and you have none. Rather, it is a truth we all must share. In fact, the rabbis go even further. They say anyone who does not make herself Heschel k'midbar, ownerless like a wilderness, is not able to acquire wisdom from Torah. It's not just that the Torah was given to the world in the wilderness, but that we must make ourselves like a wilderness in order to be able to receive wisdom. There's a story about the university professor who went to visit a Zen master to learn more about Zen. The master first invited him to sit for a cup of tea. The professor sat down and started talking about everything he knew about Zen. The master quietly prepared and poured the tea, and all the while the professor jabbered on. When the tea was filled to the cup's brim, the Zen master kept pouring. The professor watched the tea overflowing onto the tray until he could no longer restrain himself. It's full. No more will go in, he blurted. The same with your mind. How can I teach you Zen unless you first empty your cup? You cannot teach someone who thinks he already knows the answers. The first step in the acquisition of wisdom is the cultivation of humility. The Kabbalists call this tzimtzum, sacred contraction. They say that in order to create the universe, God had to pull God's self back a little bit to make room. God had to do tzimtzum. If God must humble God's self to create the universe, how much more so must we humble ourselves if we are to try and understand it just a little bit better? Perhaps this is what the rabbis mean by Hefker B'midbar, ownerless like a wilderness. We must make ourselves more open like a wilderness so that there is room for new wisdom to take root. In Zen, they have a similar concept. It's called beginner's mind. The Zen master Shinryu Suzuki writes, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." It is the cultivation of the mind of a child who is not yet encumbered by all the definitelys and the can'ts and the shoulds that tend to prevent us from learning something new. Suzuki explains the mind of the beginner is empty, free of the habits of the expert, ready to accept, to doubt, and open to all the possibilities. It is the kind of mind which can see things as they are. As the naturalist Rachel Carson writes, a child's world is fresh and new, beautiful, full of wonder and excitement. It is our misfortune for most of us that the clear-eyed vision, that true instinct for what is beautiful and awe-inspiring is dimmed and even lost before we reach adulthood. And so it is fitting that we read about the Midbar on this Shabbat before Shavuot. Tonight is 44 days of the Omer, which means that in 6 days we will stand together at Sinai and receive Torah. And the Parsha reminds us that we must prepare ourselves to receive that wisdom, that if we are like a full teacup when we arrive at Shavuot, the wisdom of Torah will pour over us and spill out on the floor. But if we can take these next few days to cultivate a beginner's mind, to make ourselves ownerless like a wilderness, there's a chance that we might acquire a newfound wisdom. I think we need Shavuot this year. I think we need the practice of tzimtzum, of sacred humility that leads to it. I think we need a reminder that we don't yet have all the answers. We live in a world of certainty and bombacity. We hear lots of facts, but I'm not sure we acquire much wisdom. Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk says that the Hefker B'midbar means that you have not yet been touched by human hands, that you have not yet been cultivated or planted. There are people in all directions shouting that they have all the answers and that all we need to do is trust in them. They want us to be loyal to ideologies, to be dogmatic spokespeople for the ideas that have been cultivated and curated by others and by algorithms. But the beginner's mind, the Hefker B'midbar, rejects all of that. It calls us to cut back the weeds of certainty and doctrine that we have been told to blindly accept so that we might create room for something else to grow. And so we need practices like the study of Torah to help us cultivate the beginner's mind, to help us shut out the shouting voices that are around us and cultivate the wisdom within. Shinryu Suzuki tells a story of a woman walking across a field covered in morning dew. She is so focused on the beauty of the meadow that she doesn't notice that she is getting wet, bit by bit. It is only when she reaches her destination that she looks down and finds that her dress is soaked. This is how we acquire a beginner's mind, not in one big moment, but bit by bit, drop by drop. We let go of things. We remove them item by item from our mind until we are emptied out, until we are ready to be a natural, untamed wilderness again. The revelation at Sinai cannot be fully realized on Shavuot without the daily practice of counting the Omer that leads up to it. 50 days of walking through the meadow, step by step, emptying ourselves out bit by bit until by the time we get to Sinai's foot, we are standing, washed, clean, and refreshed, open, and ready. Perhaps this is what the psalmist means when he says, "Teach me to number my days that I may obtain a heart of wisdom." And the cultivation of such a practice needn't stop at Shavuot. As I shared earlier, on June 13, we are launching our new Shabbat morning Torah class, not a daily practice, but a weekly one. And the people who create a regular learning practice know that it is not just about acquiring more knowledge. It is about cultivating a learner's mind that will serve them in the world the rest of the week. It is about hearing different perspectives to remind ourselves that more than one thing can be true at once, that more than one person can be right at once. It's about being in community with other learners and sometimes disagreeing, but building a deep enough relationship over time that we can disagree and still love each other. And we might even understand ourselves better by seeking to understand them. It's about coming each week, not because we think we have all the answers, but because we've cultivated the sacred humility to know that we have barely formed the questions. Reb Zalman Schachter Shlomi asks, what do I need to ask God for this Shavuot? As an answer, he quotes Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who wrote that the Torah is an answer, but we must rediscover the question. We are not interested in recovering the old questions. Rather, just as in the past we could ask the Torah questions relevant to our deepest concerns and expect an answer, so can we now. This is why each year we stand anew before the mountain of Sinai. I invite you to come and join us at the base of the mountain. I invite you to come and join us in a place where you might cultivate your own beginner's mind, in a place where you might make yourself Hefker B'midbar. In that wide open expanse, may new ideas bloom and new connections blossom. And in that way, may we find ourselves together on a journey towards wisdom. Shabbat Shalom.